sound speeds. And I'm going to tell you something that microphone manufacturers do not want you to hear. If you like the microphone that you are currently using, do not upgrade it unless you absolutely have to. Why? Well, let me explain. Let's go to camel.com, which is an Amazon price tracker that's been operational for years and years and years. Now, how long is that? Well, at least 16 as of the time of this recording. And how do I know that? Because if you go and look up the Audio-Technica AT2020 XLR microphone, it has been tracked since before 2009, changed over to 2010, because this is 2009 right there. And you can see the price was around, what, $77, something like that. And it has maintained right around the $100 price point with some peaks, which was around 2020. So right at the beginning of the COVID shutdown, they decided to increase their prices. But it's gone all the way down, sometimes as low as $50.59 on Amazon alone. And third parties have sold it for even less than that. But the price has been consistently right around $100. But what about the Blue Yeti? We know about the Blue Yeti, and unfortunately, they've changed the links a few times through Amazon, and they've released white versions and black versions and different versions. And this is the farthest back one I was able to find, which goes back to 2016. But even then, the price is still holding consistent. Right now, it's even $90. So that's even right now at a low point. But you can see that $90 is a place it hovers around sometimes. Sometimes it's around 110. Sometimes it's up around 130. But the price is relatively one of these, consistently. But look at something that's more premium, like the Sennheiser MKH 416, which is currently out of stock, but the price has held and maintained consistently since before 2015. And to give you an idea, it goes back even farther than that. If you look at something like B&H today, where the price is listed as $1,000, but then you go to the Wayback Machine and you look at B&H's listing, it was selling for $1,200 on March 14th, 2010. So over 15 years ago, it was selling for $200 more than it currently is today. Now look at something like the Shure SM7B on Camel. And it is holding true at pretty much right around $400. And it's been that way since pretty much the time Trump took office the first time. So how about the Audio-Technica AT875R? Well, it's holding true right around the same price also, just less than about $170. So right around $169. Yeah, that's what it is. With sometimes discounts down to $149, but it's basically holding its price. How about the Electro Voice RE20? Same thing, around $450, sometimes with discounts down to around $400, but mainly it's around $450. How about the Aperture D80? Well, D80 S Mic 2. Well, it's pretty much always been the same price, around $360, $359, with a sale, it looks like, just before Christmas of 2025. And how about this microphone right here, the Earthworks Ethos? Since it launched, it doesn't have but a couple of years behind it, but still, it was launched at a much higher price. It was around probably around $700, and it peaked up over $750 before dropping down to where it's lived around $400 for months and months and months. Now, how is it a possibility that this is even accurate? I thought prices were supposed to be going up and up and up. If you look at McDonald's and how much their prices have increased over the past 10 years, you're going to see that it's increased by up to almost 200%, depending on what you buy. But I'm not just picking on McDonald's here. Other brands are the same way. McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Carl's Jr., Hardee's, and Five Guys even. Their prices have increased. The average cost of a new car has increased. And as we know, real estate is completely out of control. And that's partially because of inflation. Partially, it's for other outside reasons. I'm not going to get into this video because not only am I not an economist, but I don't want to potentially bring politics into this. But I'm going to say this. Look back at 2000. We have increased, prices that are increasing, and this is inflation, 2 to 3%, something like that. As Obama took office, the same kind of thing. It dropped down quite a bit, and then it stabilized. It was a little bit lower than it was during the Bush era. And then as we approached the Trump era, it went up ever so slightly. And as we entered the Biden era, it went crazy. And now that we're in the second Trump era, it looks like it's pretty much stabilized as of right now. But that is not trying to bring politics into it. That is just prices in general. Now, what does any of this have to do with anything else? Well, you would expect to see microphones increase in price like most other things, right? But they don't. And why is that? because technology advances and tech becomes cheaper. If you're making the same product over and over again for year after year after year, some things are going to go down in cost. Some things are going to go up in cost. The things that are going to go up are things like inflation. As prices of everything increases, so would the price of goods. But then when the cost of those goods, the components that make them, go down, it kind of evens out a little bit. So when the prices of products are hitting the shelves do definitely, it's going to cost more when it hits those shelves, but the price is actually lower to those manufacturers, and therefore they're able to pass the savings on to companies like Best Buy and Amazon. So their prices maintain relatively the same. Why am I mentioning this? Because it's very plain and simple that if you are happy with the microphone you use, you don't need to buy anything else. You don't need to upgrade for the sake of upgrading, or even buying something different because I want to buy something. Now, if you're making money and you need to spend it for a tax write-off, I understand that. Believe me, I've done that quite a bit on this channel. I will spend every single bit that I make on this YouTube channel and through my rentals in order to zero out my tax liability on that by constantly upgrading my gear and keeping it fresh and new. But if you don't have to actually upgrade, then you don't need to. If you're doing a podcast, you don't need to upgrade just for the sake of upgrading or buying a new version of the same microphone every couple of months for no reason. The tech on those even doesn't necessarily advance. The modules in there may change. It might ever so slightly change the sound of something like that, but you don't need to actually upgrade. I know this sounds really weird, but it doesn't. It doesn't need to necessarily be something you have to really work hard to comprehend. As prices increase and the cost of things go down, it's going to more or less even out. That's not across the board, though. With things like audio interfaces, the prices do steadily start to increase over the course of time. With lavalier microphones, they're constantly trying to get smaller and smaller with more premium parts, so those prices will go up. But then look at the tech and how we have advanced so far in the past few years. Even things like action cameras, like the DJI Osmo Action 4. That is a 4K camera that shoots 10-bit video and has D-Log, so you can color correct at a higher dynamic range, and that is currently on sale as of the time of this recording for $200. Are you kidding me? That is a tremendous deal. And a lot of the times we seem to, as humans, underestimate the amazingness of tech and how it has increased tremendously over the course of the past few years. I don't know why people seem to think that tech is still expensive and too expensive when it has gone down tremendously. Televisions back in the 80s, if you were to adjust for inflation, the big clunky televisions that we had that were only like 35-inch, that were massive back then, would be 3 times the cost of a 4K 72-inch display that we can buy brand new in a store today, and the thing is like this thick. Tech has progressed in such an amazing, at such an amazing rate over the past few years. Things that we never thought were possible. Making AI videos out of absolutely nothing and just let a computer completely generate things. We're able to see videos on channels like the Y-Files, where they use AI to create the images that kind of go along with the story that they're telling. That's amazing. While people like Captain Disillusion are still doing things the old school way and actually doing manual correction and doing VFX the way that we've always done it. Well, at least since we started doing VFX, in the early 90s, late 80s, technically. But my point here is that tech has progressed at such a level that yet we seem to be almost bitter about how it's going. I need to buy this because I'm not happy with this current microphone setup. This isn't working for me. I need to upgrade. You don't. One of the things I've had to do over the course of the past few years is look at things from a perspective of what could I buy with that money elsewhere. For example, if I were going to buy a brand new microphone, and let's just say that microphone was for, let's just say it was $200. If a microphone I'm going to buy is $200, I might look at that and say, okay, how many hours do I need to work for that? If I make $20 an hour, let's say, I would have to work 10 hours. But if the price of that were $400, I'd have to work 20 hours for this. Back up in time. That price has now gone back. And how much was I making maybe 10, 15 years ago? Well, if you were looking at that and saying, well, I was only making like $10 an hour back then, and I wanted the same microphone, but it would have taken me twice as many hours to make it, to get the money to make that payment and to make that, to buy that microphone. Think about that. That as tech has increased in progress in its abilities and what it's able to do, the fact that we're able to record 8K videos on our phone is insane to me, especially considering that a few years ago, it was only 2009 when we went from SD to HD, and 720 was like, wow, that is so sharp. But even then, if you back up another 10 years or so, even then, we were looking at DVDs and like, wow, that DVD quality is so much better than the 240p VHS that most people were still recording on back in the late 90s and early aughts. It's crazy to me that people seem to think they need to upgrade just for the sake of upgrading. You don't need to. If you want to, that's one thing, but don't fool yourself into thinking that you have to upgrade because you absolutely don't. The way that I usually, in a modern era with prices across the board being up, I usually look at things as sandwiches. How many of these Baconator hamburgers could I buy at Wendy's? Or how many of the double bacon, or the as they call them, the bacon cheeseburgers at Five Guys, how many of those could I buy in exchange for what I would actually want? If it's 10, I have to determine if something I want to buy is the equivalent of that many sandwiches. Or, and you could say, well, that's just because you're fat, but hey, it is what it is, right? But if I look at this and say I would have to buy 25 of those burgers to equal the microphone versus 10 of the burgers to equal the microphone, you could say, well, if they're the same microphone and the only difference is inflation, well, do you actually need to spend that additional money to get it, or should you actually spend the money elsewhere? Don't let me give you financial advice. I'm just telling you that if you are looking at gear and think that you need to upgrade for the sake of upgrading, you don't. The tech is constantly progressing and getting better and better and better. The tools that we have, even at our fingertips for free, are absolutely amazing. A lot of the software that we have, we're able to buy a license that upgrades and keeps itself fresh and new. And that is going to make a lot of what we do completely amazing. It used to be 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that noise floor of the actual microphone, the self noise of the microphone itself, was a big deal. This day and age, anyone that nitpicks over that is kind of nitpicking over something that doesn't really exist anymore. The noise floor is so low on microphones, even if it was considered to be a noisy microphone, it's going to be well below the noise floor of your environment. And if it's not, it's going to be zero issue for post to get out. Even if you're doing post yourself, simple $30 plugins that you can get, like the Waves NS1, you could just put that on the 0 setting and it's going to knock out your background noise. And 0 out of 100 is nothing. It's just barely, it's like on, but it's barely doing anything, and it's able to knock out that noise floor. It's that easy to do, and it doesn't cut in on your sound at all. Well, I mean, if someone really wanted to nitpick it and they were audiophile, they could probably do that. But in the real world, no one's going to care. No one's going to notice. I don't even notice it. If I forget to run it, I'm like, oh, I notice a background noise. But if I just hit the click button and click it and turn it on, and suddenly it's there, I'm like, oh, okay. Am I missing anything? No, I'm not. So my point here is, if you seem to think for some reason you need to upgrade your audio setup, even your camera setup, ask yourself this: what are you lacking? Is there anything that you feel like you are really lacking in your setup? If so, you may feel that need. But most of the time, you do not need to upgrade for the simple sake of upgrading because some new shiny feature looks amazing. Most of the tech out there progresses at a rate that we can't keep up with unless we are very, very wealthy. So you have to pick and choose if you're going to skip a generation, if you're going to not upgrade, but maybe every 5 years, or what have you. But you need to make that determination for yourself and stick to your guns. You don't need to upgrade just because some new ad comes out there to try to convince you that some microphone is absolutely what you need because it's the best out there. When many of the tried and trues that we've had for a long time, even the Sennheiser MKH 416 has dropped $200 over the past 15 years. Think about that. That's sound advice. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.